So this week, I want to discuss the tools that I use to make hand cannon Janky reality. But before I begin, if you want to support me in everything I do, check out Hand Cannon Janky Reality, now on Steam and itch.io. You can also check out Merge Sprite, which is also on itch.io. Now that the advertisement is done, let's get to the video. As some of you probably already know, Hand Cannon was made in a game framework instead of a game engine. Now, this wasn't entirely to stroke my own ego, but it was partially done to get around the annoying licensing issues. See, Monogame is open source and free to use, meaning I can extend the framework to suit my needs and only need to credit Monogame in my credits screen, so it doesn't cost me a penny. Now, Monogame is a bit harder to use than Unity, since it lacks a built-in editor and a number of the other pre-made functions, but I knew I was going to create my own physics engine, and, well, everything else, so I had no problems with this. Now, for game art, I used only one tool, and it was the first place where I spent money. I used Sprite. Now, Sprite currently sells for $20 on Steam, but it usually goes on sale a couple times a year. It can swing anywhere between about $10 to $14. However, spending that $20 isn't mandatory to acquire the software, and I don't mean piracy either. You can actually get the software for free on the GitHub page. However, just know that you're going to have to compile it yourself. I'm sure there are YouTube videos out there that cover this. However, Sprite is amazing, and I highly recommend that if you enjoy the software, to support the developer. So for Hand Cannon, I actually created my own level editor. So technically, it didn't cost me anything. However, early on, I did use Tiled to create the very early prototypes of the game, which I could have still used if I didn't want user-generated levels. But since I wanted that user-generated content, and I can't really distribute Tiled with my game, I had no other choice. Now in Tiled, you have the opportunity to spit out JSON files, which means that I also had to parse JSON files. And for that, I needed a JSON library. I used TinyJSON. Like many other tools, TinyJSON is free to use, and it's available in quite a few different languages. So if you want a simple library to parse your JSON files, check it out. Anyways, Tiled is a great level editor with a ton of features, so I highly recommend it for anyone who doesn't want to go through the headache of creating their own level editor, like I did. Now, the next place where I spent money was my music creation tool. I already have a preferred DAW where I make my music, and originally I'd acquired some free VSTs, and I attempted to get that Sega Genesis sound. However, I didn't like the end result, so I did some more digging, and I found a tracker called Mask, which allows you to create Genesis music, like actual Sega Genesis music that can be played on the Sega Genesis. All the music in Hand Cannon was composed with this tool. Mask can be found on Steam for $15, but I bought it on itch for $10. Though just be warned that the default sounds are rather limited, so you'll need to learn how to create your own instruments or locate some that you can use online. Now, the rest of my sounds were created in a free tool called Chiptone. I would consider this a rather robust 8 to 16-bit sound generator. It can create a range of sounds from bleeps and bloops all the way to noise explosions and UFO sound effects. It's very easy to use, and I couldn't recommend it more for people who are trying to get that retro aesthetic when it comes to their sounds. Now, unlike most games, Hand Cannon is a bit of an oddity and requires a database manager to manage the levels. For this, I used MySQL. Now, if I didn't decide to host custom levels on my own server, this wouldn't have been necessary, but I have a special case, so it was required. However, the cool thing about this tool is you can get it for free. But if you're new to game development, I highly advise you to stay away from anything that's network related, as it's a skill on its own that's totally outside the realm of game development and video game programming. I had to learn quite a bit about AWS to get everything running, and honestly, it's not really something I recommend for people who are just trying to get going. I did purchase the Hand Cannon logo and the retro style box art. However, neither of those things were necessary for the release of my game. However, if you're curious, I paid $60 for the Hand Cannon logo and another $75 for the retro style box art. Now, the cutscene art and modern cover were done by my friend Cartoon Coffee. However, despite not paying actual money for this art, I did pay by creating a tool for him that allowed him to quickly parse his sprite sheets. It wasn't anything fancy or even worth showing off. However, the base of that tool did become Merge Sprite. So, looking at what was actually required to create the game, I spent $30. Oh, and before I forget, the vast majority of the programming and art were all done on my Acer Switch Alpha 12, which was released in 2016. proving you don't need anything state-of-the-art to develop your average 2D game. Hopefully, this video helps out someone out there that believes they need a large amount of money to begin their journey in game development. You don't. A decade-old laptop and free tools will work just fine. You just need to know where to look. Getting into game development has never been easier and cheaper than it is right now. Technically, I could have even saved those $30 if I would have been a bit more frugal. I could have compiled a sprite myself and used the free deprecated version of Devilmask, and I likely would have been just fine. However, I wanted to make sure that I was at least supporting the individuals that were creating the tools that I was using to make my game. Anyways, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your time.